Okay, so our speaker tonight is Jeremy Coleman, resident of Shelburne Falls and a very active birder of the area. Also a very active cyclist, has done a lot of very long cycling trips. Also an architect, now retired. And also a very dazzling photographer. Any of us who are on Facebook on the Western Mass Bird Photography group have already been dazzled by some of his work there. And he's going to share some of it with us tonight from a few of his travels, not all of them in Massachusetts. And I guess, Jeremy, why don't I just let you take it away from here?
All right, thank you, Josh. Let me try to get the Zoom logistics taken care of here. First, I'm going to share my screen and expand this, slide that out of the way. Okay, first of all, can everyone hear me all right? I'm not sure I can hear anyone else, so I'm going to assume that's the case unless Josh tells me.
Yeah, I've gone through muting people, so I can hear you fine, and yeah, and your title slide is up on the screen. So
okay, great. So I'll just jump right in. Well, first of all, I hope you all. I'm going to be showing any number of photographs from Maine and elsewhere, and I hope that, given what's going on in the world, especially our neck of the world these days, you consider this medicinal. I do, and it's going to be. I hope it'll be interesting and entertaining for those interested in birds. So I'm going to focus on Maine breeding birds, the endemic species and boreal specialties to be found there, and there's in terms of information that you might look for if you chose to go up to Maine to look for birds. There's a book by Bob Duchesne called The Maine Birding Trail, and also a terrific website, which is very comprehensive, called, which is of the same name, mainebirdingtrail.com. And I first went up to Maine to look for birds and to photograph birds in 2015. I went with a Brookline Bird Club field trip up there. And then for the ensuing 4 years, I went for 2 weeks during the month of June to a number of spots, mostly in the boreal woods of Maine. And my wife and I, Stacy, were going to go up this year, but with the COVID uncertainty, we didn't. In retrospect, I think it would have been fine. We would have taken our trailer and been pretty isolated. But in any case, here we have a boreal chickadee looking out on the world. And the first area that we're going to talk about is Piscataquis County, which you can see on the map. The lower 20% or so of the county has towns in it, and then further than everything else is just unincorporated townships. It's the gateway to the Allagash, and I say a place to stay. There may be others, but not much. This is just east of Mount Katahdin, and I stayed at a campground called the Nessawadnahunk Lake Wilderness Campground. I had to practice that a little bit, and the reason being that it provided good access to the North Maine Woods Telos checkpoint. So the North Maine Woods is a consortium of lumber companies and other stakeholders in central Maine, and you can't just go in and out. You have to go in via a checkpoint. You check in, you sign in, you pay a fee, which is not at all expensive. It might have been something like $5 a day for a week or something like that. But within 10-mile radius of this checkpoint, one can find almost all the Maine boreal specialties. How would I know that? eBird. And you can check the recent eBird sightings. And the Maine Breeding Bird Survey is now, I believe, in its 5th year. So there is a lot of information in terms of locating nesting species in the month of June. So this is the campground. I won't spend much time with this, but you can see there's a little, basically a trailer park, but there are cabins all along the spruces there. And the cabins are primitive cabins. You use an outhouse. The water is not potable, but it is heated. You can wash the dishes and take a shower, and all in all, just everything you could want in that setting. So I went up there, spent the night. Early the next morning, I had my route all planned out, went straight to Telis Road, and the very first bird I ran into of interest was this beautiful male bay-breasted warbler on territory. So bay-breasted warblers in that part of the world have slightly different habitat choices, as do a lot of warblers, actually, migrants. They favor younger successional growth. The significance there is they're not way up in the tops of the trees. They're eye level or not too far above, and much easier to find and especially photograph. So I took a number of photographs of this particular individual. Here are 2 more. I caught him in flight just as he was leaving that perch. And sort of a thrill, really, because they're regular but rare, I would say, in migration here. We see them, but not that often, and often not very close up. So moving on to a bird that actually is pretty common here as a breeder, but again, it has a somewhat different nesting habit or habitat preference in Maine, is the black-throated green. It extends obviously into even completely deciduous forests here, but there it's into the coniferous forest, at least because that's all there is. So here's a beautiful male singing, and 2 more. And these, the bird on the left is gleaning insects or maybe insect larvae from this conifer, and the bird on the right, again, captured in the understory, just looking up to take flight. Canada warblers are all over the place there. They're really common. Of course, they breed here too, in some areas, especially around Quabbin, and I suppose around Greylock. But they're just really common. Again, an understory species. If there's a mixed coniferous deciduous area in a wet setting, there probably are going to be Canada warblers singing their garbled song vociferously in 2nd, 3rd week of June, 2nd week especially. So here's a singing bird on the left, and on the right we've got a male perched in a what they call in Maine a hackmatack, tamarack, which is just leafing out, although I guess in this case we would say just needling out. And magnolia warblers are pretty common up there. Again, not at all exclusive to the North Woods. They're again common in coniferous thickets. If you're driving along the roads, you hear their song, their little weed, wheat song constantly, actually. They can be a little secretive, but now and then pop out for a great view. And mourning warbler, much less common nester in Western Massachusetts, although this June I was over at Greylock and found, I think, 4 or 5 of them. There seemed to be a lot of them there this year. Mourning warblers I found hard to find, actually, in the area I was looking. And one reason is that the lumber companies have changed their harvesting practices. They really don't do clear cuts anymore. They do more selective cutting. So you don't find these large expanses of second or even third year succession, all the sort of brushy stuff amid all the lumber stumps and branches and so on that really favors their, which favors them. But this one did what it's supposed to do and popped up for a good look. Great looking bird. Yellow rumps are really common breeders up there, as they are in appropriate habitat here. We see them, of course, most commonly, they overwinter to some degree. We see lots of them in the fall, coming and spring migrations both. Blackburnian, same deal really. They breed here in the appropriate habitat. I've seen them not just in Quabbin, but even in places like Ashfield, Massachusetts, and especially up on Greylock. By anyone's counting, I think one of the most beautiful wood warblers we have, with its flamy orange throat on the males. Two more here. Wilson's warbler. Again, some years they seem to be pretty common, like this spring especially, as a migrant, spring migrant, and some years we see very few at all. They are, they like shrub thickets, especially with alders or willows along the edges of wet areas. I've only found one breeding pair, however, and this is the male from that pair. And they were just where they were supposed to be in willows and alders along a stream, right along a dirt road running through the forested area. And two other views, the one on the right that is in an alder for sure. You can see the female catkins here. And this was really my big target species for me. This was 2019 that I was at Nesquahadunk. See, without the name there, I can't even remember how to pronounce it entirely. American three-toed woodpecker. I knew where they were supposed to be, and I spent several hours for 3 days in succession walking driving and walking the areas where they had been reported. They've got a pretty distinctive drum, and I finally heard it, got out of the car. Almost immediately, two males flew right across the road into this spruce, and they were counter drumming on either side of the spruce tree. They were sitting as you see them, and then one would drum for a little bit, and then silence. Then the other would drum for a little bit, and then silence. And then they would burst out with some raucous calling, and repeated this for a little bit. It was tough to photograph in there, a lot of backlighting, and then they were often in deep shadow. So I didn't get the greatest photograph in the world, but it was a thrill to see them. Spruce grouse. Now we're into a boreal forest endemic, obviously a non-migratory species. They like spruce and balsam fir, and that's what we have. This individual, I flushed with its chicks out of the road, and she ran a little bit and paused, and I was able to get a shot through the grass, and that was sort of a thrill. And then on another occasion, found a different individual with chicks, and they flew up into some conifers and stopped and looked back. So on the right, we have the chick, and on the left, the adult. Great looking bird, fun to find. So now we're going to move to Aroostook County. So Aroostook County is northern Maine. It's a mix of boreal forest and agricultural area. A lot of potato farming up there. And right where the star is, that's Presque Isle, which is we used as a home base. I believe this was in 2018. And we stayed at this old hotel, Northeastland Hotel. It's kind of a classic. Reminded me a little bit of the Hotel Latches, you know, clean and well kept, but not entirely up to date. But it was great up there. We enjoyed it a lot, and it provided access to an area called New Sweden, which was settled, in fact, by Swedes, who many immigrated to this particular area, probably in the late 19th century. And it's a great area for boreal species. And again, there's some references here. These are BO stands for Bird Observer. So if you don't subscribe to Bird Observer, if you do subscribe to Bird Observer, you can just find these articles and download them as PDFs. If not, you can buy them. I think they're quite inexpensive, maybe $5 each or something along those lines. Another good resource was the Maine ATV Trails Map, which you can get from maine.gov. And once you see where all the ATV trails, and a lot of them are on old railroad beds, you can drive the back roads to where it intersects with the trail in a likely looking spot, and then walk for a couple of miles up and down, and it'll take you through, you know, just great habitat through bogs and spruce fir, hemlock forests, and you know, run through all kinds of habitats with great birding along the way. So in Aroostook County, but elsewhere, we did find boreal chickadees. Boreal chickadees up there do not behave like black-capped chickadees. They're really quite shy. You know, you can hear them with their sort of languid chickadee calls, but they don't come out to be seen generally. This one did. It's pretty dark in the shadows, so I had to shoot at high ISO. But this one is up in this patch of old man's beard, and this one just popped up for a second above this balsam before popping down again. And you know, that's, you know, maybe you get a face and an eyeball or an obscured view. At least that's been my experience up there. But fun birds, great to look at, and you know, easier to find than to see. Swainson's thrush, pretty common migrant through here. They breed all over the place in the boreal forest up in northern Maine. Early in the morning, you hear them singing all over the place, like this one. So there was one spot in New Sweden along an ATV trail. I only knew about it because it was written up in that Bird Observer article. You can't really see the bog from the road, but you cut through the trees along the side of the road and get into this bog there, and it was loaded. Had yellow-bellied flycatchers, northern water thrushes, northern perillas, and another species which I have queued up, so we'll figure out, that will remind me of what it was. Anyway, yellow-bellied flycatchers, you know, these were pretty tame. This was probably within, I don't know, 10, 15 feet of me to photograph, giving their little, their quick little calls. Song, I guess it's their song. 2 more photos of yellow-bellied flycatchers. Yeah, palm warblers were the other species that were common in there. So we see a lot of palm warblers, both so-called western palms and yellow palm warblers, which is the race that breeds in Maine. But they look a little, you know, coming through in the spring, they look like this. Coming through in the fall, when we see so many of them, they're already in their fall basic plumage, and they're not not so bright as this. The red, they don't have that brick red color on their heads, and that's red streaking on the sides. And they like they like, again, they like wet areas, like to be near old man's beard, usually near water. Here's Tumo fortis. So the one on the right I took up in Maine, and it's again has that breeding plumage. The one on the left, this is the way we see them in migration in the fall, and you can see they're into their first basic, well, they're into their basic plumage, and they look quite different. Well, at least a little different. Obviously, palm warbler. And there were northern parullas in there. I took photos of northern parullas, or parula, if you're in the parula school, in that bog, but this one was taken out in the open. Pretty common up there, and found a little bit higher up in the canopy than some of these other species, but always a gorgeous bird. And here we're back in that bog, and here's the northern water thrush, you know, in the typical habitat. And you can see, you know, there are the mosses and some lichens in there, and some ferns and some sedges and some fallen spruces. And that's what it looks like. Canada jay, supposed to be common there, but I've never had much success finding them there. I have found them in northern Vermont up near Moose Bog, but the only ones I've seen, the only two that I've seen in my 5 trips to the Northwoods were both juveniles. So here we have a very young bird, and you can see still has all that fluffy, downy plumage where the feathers aren't zipped together, which will get those feathers. He or she'll get those feathers shortly. I believe the population in Maine is shrinking and persists mostly in lowland black spruce bogs, and that's exactly where the ones that I did see were. Black-backed woodpecker. So similar in many ways to three-toed, but has a different habitat preference. Likes to have logged, it says swamp, I read that I did not see them in swampy areas, mostly sort of open areas with spruce that probably had been killed by spruce budworm. And that's where I had this photo, and these two are actually the same bird. And then when you get out of the boreal forest and out into the potato growing regions, there are other specialties out there. There's, you know, Vesper sparrow and so on, and northern harriers. So here's an adult male, a gray ghost. We found it was consorting with a female. They had a nest in sort of a copse between 2 potato fields where there was a stream, kind of a wet area coming through, and they didn't farm it, and just plowed all their stumps and stones in there, and there were trees growing, and the northern harriers were in that area. So moving along to down east coastal, this is a map showing the 2 Moosehorn refuges. Moosehorn Wildlife Refuge has 2 areas, the Bering Division and the Edmonds Division. We birded both and had a lot of success in both areas. Probably did a little better in the Edmonds Division, which is along the shore. There's very, very high tides there. I think they get 15 or 18 foot tidal difference there. Just a little bit southwest of Lubeck, which is right here before you get into Campobello Island, which is really worth the trip because the FDR estate there is beautiful, is the town of Machias, which is right on Route 1 along the coast. And the Machias River empties out there, and there's this, the Down East Sunrise Rail Trail runs from Lubec all the way through Machias, all the way down to Ellsworth. It's about 77 miles long. But the section along the north side of the Machias River is very reliable for Nelson sparrow. Nelson sparrow is kind of interesting. There's three distinct populations here, and it used to include what is now called, what is it, the salt marsh sparrow, but they were split probably in the 90s. And in the fall, we get, I've seen it twice actually, we get the Midwestern Nelson sparrow, which breeds like northern Minnesota, that kind of area. But, and they're much more colorful. But you can hear, if you go out early, you can hear the Nelson sparrows singing in the tidal salt marsh right along the rail trail there. And the other thing of note for down east coastal, this part of the world, is Machias Seal Island. So if you want to go see puffins, or for that matter, razorbills or common mewers, which also breed there, Boldcast.com is a charter company out of Cutler, Maine. And they take 15 people per day from the US out there. And you can also, there are also 15 a day that come there from Canada. They sort of share access to the island, not including the scientific community there. And there are blinds on the island, so you get in, you go up, you get off the boat, up a slippery ramp onto the island. You get dive bombed by Arctic terns, get into the blinds, and you get great views of the breeding areas for the for those alces. But this is Nelson sparrow right along the Machias River. This subspecies, I think, is restricted to tidal salt marshes, you know, from Maine, then up north, going into Canada. And that's its population, pretty much its breeding population. Once you get into the blinds, you need to be there on an overcast day, because both times I've been there, it was extremely bright and difficult to make photographs because of the glare and specular reflection in the shadows. But here's two puffins, and they're down into a big crevice in the rock, so they're in the shadow, so making for good photographs. And they nest, that's, you know, they nest down there. Arctic tern on the left, puffin flying from, flying across the water back to the island. The years I was there was a big problem with bait fish. And they had to fly further and further to feed their young. I don't know what the status of that now is, but there was concern with the puffin population at Machias Island, Machias Seal. So razorbills, here's a pair of razorbills doing some courtship, and common mewers out on the rocks. So on the way to down east Maine, it's well worth a stop at the Kennebunk Plains. The Kennebunk Plains is a sand barren maintained by the state of Maine. I forget who the organizations are that actually maintain it, but you know, it's just like Montague, just like the Montague Plains here or elsewhere in the state. Used to be an area that was maintained by fire, and no longer now that with fire suppression, so they're artificially maintained through cutting. But this is not far. You can see the star in the map just south of Portland. It's not really a long trip from where we are, and you can find breeding eastern meadowlark, vesper sparrow, upland sandpipers, and grasshopper sparrows shown right here. And this is also a great area for Lepidoptera, both moths and butterflies. We went up there early in the year. We saw just this year, we saw harvester and a lot of interesting leps. So, but that's for another time. So Vesper Sparrow, these were taken this year. The pair on the left was doing a courtship. And on the right, we've got a bird sitting on the sand in the bright sun. It was funny, when we were up there this year, we hardly saw any meadowlarks at all, but other years I've seen lots of meadowlarks and very few Vesper sparrows. I guess that was maybe a function of the time of year. But anyway, there's plenty of meadowlarks up there, and they're establishing territory pretty early, and great to be able to get good views of many and to have photographic opportunities of them there. And yeah, and I haven't succeeded in photographing upland sandpiper anywhere, actually. I mean, I have some photographs, but not that are worth showing. So we'll be heading up there again this spring. Maybe the third time's the charm. So how are we set for time, Josh?
I think we're doing okay. It's 10 past 8, so you definitely have a little more time to continue your talk before we want to descend into question and answers. So
okay,
keep on trucking.
Okay, so the next area I want to look at is sort of a complete non sequitur when you come right down to it. But another area that I have been traveling to frequently is the Outer Cape, both Race Point, other places along the Cape. And I'm not going to show photographs of shorebirds here, but really concentrate somewhat on pelagics and other species that that you can find out in that neck of the woods. So here's a Google map of the Outer Cape. So by the way, can people, I don't know if people can see my mouse when I circle it here. Does that show up on the screen?
Shows up for me.
Okay,
Yeah,
good.
me too.
Okay, good. So up here, whoops, now I've lost it. There we go. If you drive out past the airport to get to Race Point, the main parking lot is kind of where, out by the ranger station, is where this green dot is. You can park there and go down to the beach and walk all the way to right about here. This is the best area, really, for seeing birds, especially early in the morning. Birds will fly out of Cape Cod Bay and they'll cut right around the inside here and you get good views. Also, if there's a strong wind from the northwest coming in, spectacular things can happen. But it's not an easy walk. It's walking in loose sand the whole way. You can also park right here, the Hatches Harbor Trail, so-called, used to be called the Fire Road. And there you're walking in on solid ground right up until you get to the dunes, at which point you kind of follow the dunes out to the beach. And there's also big tidal rip here. So there's a lot of upwelling of nutrients, and you know, a lot of seals there, a lot of, yeah, just a lot of, you know, a lot of loons and ducks and, you know, all kinds of stuff there, which is not really what we're looking at today. Also, you want to check out Hatches Harbor, which is just on the southwest facing side here. When I'm out there, I feel like I'm just in the middle of nowhere. It feels like I'm on a little spit of land sticking out into the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and it sort of is. It's just a beautiful area. You can also go out in pelagics. I need to mention that. The Brookline Bird Club runs 2 overnight trips per year, so they get way out there. They got up to Jeffrey's Ledge. And also, if you subscribe to Mass Bird, you can scan the notices, and there are various individuals who organize half-day pelagic trips. They only take the captain, the organizer, and 6 others. It's first come, first served. But you know, it's great, especially if it's not too, if the seas aren't too rough. If the seas are rough, it's maybe not that great. at least for me, because I get seasick, but generally it's been fine. So you get out to Race Point Beach on the right. You know, this is the beach at dawn. The sun's coming up, backlighting the little the wave-formed sand here. These are all gray seals out in the water. And of course, the gray seals, are, of which there are thousands upon thousands now at the Cape, are what bring the white sharks in. And I haven't ever seen a white shark there, but I have talked to people who've seen white sharks attacking seals, and they will grab them and, you know, throw them 10 feet in the air. And these are big, big animals. It must be pretty dramatic. On the left, this is just stopping on the road going out to the parking lot to the ranger station. This was in the fall. Just, you know, it's not a bad place to be. Looking out over Provincetown, there's the clock tower in Provincetown Harbor. So I just am touching on some of the stuff you can see out there. In the fall, parasitic Jaegers patrol the beaches. And of course, they are harassing terns. And if a tern has some fish or sand eels, for instance, that's easy for the Jaegers. They'll just harass the tern until it drops its catch, and the Jaegers will swoop in and take it like not 20 feet away in the air. They're very acrobatic, as you can see from these photos. And if the terns have already, even if the terns have swallowed recently, they'll regurgitate their food to get rid of the Jaegers. I have seen, but not succeeded in photographing, the other two Jaeger species out there, long-tailed and Pomerans. And I have yet to see a skua out there, but they are seen regularly. And, you know, and sometimes they fly right down the beach. So that would be quite a thrill. Lots of shearwaters. These are probably both taken from a boat, but they are some years, not 2019, but 2017 and 2018, there were huge numbers of sand eels, sand lances right along the beach, and they'd be washed up, and there'd be this silver ribbon along the high tide line. And all the seabirds, even fulmars, but cories and all the shearwaters were right along the beach. I mean, like 20 feet out. It was really cool. So here we've got Cory shearwater on the left and great shearwater on the right. These are probably great shearwater is by far the most common species. Cory might be the second most common. And the other two species that are seen out there are Manx and sooties. Manx looks vaguely like a great shearwater, but not really, and much smaller, much faster, stiffer wing beat, and aptly named sooty shearwater. Northern fulmars, so these were both taken from a boat at reasonably close range. Fulmars come in a number of color phases, so we can see a fairly dark one. I think there's a darker version that can be seen that I haven't. But on the right and on the left, we've got a white face northern fulmar. You can see their tubes that they use to eject saline solution from drinking seawater. You go out on the boats on a flat day, and it can just be really spectacular. Here we've got two red-necked phalaropes settling on the water. There's a big flock of them. They were some distance away, but this photo just got into focus nicely. And black-legged kittiwakes are common out there. A lot of species I didn't include for perceived lack of time anyway. I just didn't want to crowd things up. But you know, all the gull species, Iceland's, the occasional glaucus, lesser blackback, in several ages, all are common gulls, a lot of Bonapartes, laughing gulls, and so on. Northern gannets on the right here, you know, they can come through out of the bay early in the morning. You see thousands and thousands of them streaming along. Further out in the water, we get Wilson's storm petrels and the occasional Leach's storm petrel. Here's one sort of doing its St. Elmo's dance on the water. Just picking up stuff on the surface of the water to feed on. And another thing you'll see out there, both right off Race Point and out in the out on the boats, there are whales, and not just humpbacks, but there are in the fall you'll find minkies, finbacks, humpbacks, some porpoises, and in the winter, going right up into the spring, the very small remaining population of right whales. I think, I may be mistaken, but I think there's like just a couple of hundred individuals left, the majority of which, if not all of which, I'm not sure, winter in Cape Cod Bay, and they can be seen off Race Point. This full breach of humpback, that was seen right from the beach. And I have seen days when I've seen minkies, humpbacks, and finbacks, not 100 feet from shore, right, just in the rip, right off the edge of right in the rip, right below the Coast Guard station out there. And of course, there are things like common porpoises, which you'll find in the boats when you go out. Not commonly, but and molas or ocean sunfish, which have been pretty common. I assume that's a global warming phenomenon and currents being carried up from the southern climes. They like to loll near the surface, and a lot of them have propeller scars. I think that's what right there. I think that's a propeller scar in front of the dorsal. And I think this is it. So then there are surprises. And I said I wouldn't do shorebirds, but one day when maybe 2017, I was out there and came across this buff-breasted sandpiper. Just a beautiful bird. It stuck around for a couple of weeks and was seen by many. Another time we were cutting through the dunes on the Fire Road past Hatches Harbor and flushed up this short-eared owl, which are not common out there. I mean, they're probably more common here in Hampshire County. I got the honeypot than they are there, but that was sort of cool as well. So yeah, that concludes the slides, and I'm happy to take questions. Let me get out of this.
Thank you, Jeremy. Let's see, I'm going to stop the recording for anyone who wants to ask questions but not be immortalized doing so. So